Hey everyone! Do you know what happened 23 years ago? Actually, a bunch of very nice people, mostly software engineers, geeky guys, came together in a, let's say, ski resort and defined something that was called Agile. It's a mindset, it's a philosophy, and at some point it became a big thing in the IT and not only in IT sphere. Nowadays, we talk about transformation to agile, and maybe some people say that's something that it's old-fashioned, it's dying. So today we're going to discuss exactly this. What is agile? What is the agile transformation about? Is it a thing nowadays or not? And we have a super nice guest, but let's first introduce ourselves. Bogi.
Yes, hey everybody, this is Management Nightmares podcast, and actually, I'm not sure if it's the second or third episode that we're doing in English. And if you don't know yet, Management Nightmares is a podcast about real life stories for success and, of course, failure, and, of course, lessons learned. And we meet you guys with super cool people. And today is no exception because our guest is very, very special and very dear to me personally because he is my former colleague and also, may I say, boss or manager. We worked in the Coca-Cola company back in the day, and we were part of the, let's say, organizational transformation capability team that was tasked with the quest to change the culture of the organization toward more agile ways of working and thinking, mindset, etc. So Kim Gokce, the name of the person, and Kim is based in Atlanta, Georgia. And without further ado, Kim, I cannot introduce you better than you can introduce yourself. So I'm going to give you the floor for our audience, that are millions of people watching us right now, to understand who you are if they don't know already.
Yeah, Bogi, very, very appreciate that. And thank you, Nikola. It's nice to see you both. It's a real privilege to join you. I was terrified you were going to use the word boss, and you almost made it without saying boss. Colleague, that's very respectful. I feel honored to be your colleague, sir. So yeah, it's great to join you. Just briefly, I am based in Atlanta, Georgia, native of Atlanta, Georgia, born from a Turkish father and American girl he met while my dad was here at university. You know, it's a classic story, meet a pretty girl, settle down, and the rest is history. So I was raised here in Atlanta, Georgia, grew up locally in Atlanta, had most of my career based in Atlanta. And for the past 30 years, that career has been in digital spaces, is what we call them now. Back in the day, it was IT or MIS, Management Information Systems. Does anyone remember that? So yeah, starting at the bottom of the operational or the open systems interconnect model, data, networking, application, and then eventually I got to what I saw as a hidden layer in that model, which is the people layer. And that's where I've been working primarily since, I would say, 2013, is on people and organizational performance in various roles, various functions, and various enterprises. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Agile Manifesto from Utah back in the day, right? Maybe we can get into a story about how I learned the word Agile. I had no idea what I was doing. It was in around 2010. So thanks again for the invite. It's great to be here.
Yeah, nice
It's
to
an
have you.
honor and it's super nice. And this is the time to invite our audience to subscribe, because this is the way. Also be active in the channel, ask questions. If we're not able to answer everything here, we're going to make an additional episode and we're going to do our best to answer your questions. So be active in the channel, subscribe, so we'll be able to produce more nice content like that. So Kim, you said that you have a story about how you learned about Agile. I was about to ask you, what is Agile for you? So maybe now you can combine these two together.
Yeah, it just popped into my head, and it's making me smile. I was back working as a technical product manager for AT&T Corporation, leading an engineering team that was working on exposing our network services as REST APIs. So this is 2010, 2013 timeframe. And it was great team, great professionals, deep engineering talent. We were doing very, very leading edge work on behalf of, a long-standing incumbent kind of heavy iron infrastructure. These network services typically were deployed in increments of 1U or 2U rack servers from Sun Systems. And I think it's safe to say now, under no NDA obligation any longer, and the world has changed. The minimum increment to deploy additional capacity was $250,000 in a lead time of 6 to 12 months minimum to grow, say, SMS or MMS services. So obviously a big opportunity. So our team was in a great place doing great work. We had a great collaborative spirit. We had a great leader on architecture, great leader on the sort of business liaison, which we might call a product owner today. And lo and behold, our CTO, Chief Technical Officer, had hired Accenture. Oh, should I say that? A consultancy to bring Agile to their engineering group and their marketing technology group where we were resident. And they assigned an Agile coach, which was this very mysterious sounding thing to me back then. They assigned an Agile coach to my team. And as the technical project manager, I was the liaison for the Accenture engagement. So their Agile coach followed us around in our team activities for a couple of weeks and sat me down every week and sort of asked questions. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, I had sort of the initial milestone meeting and read back to me, my understanding was they'd read back to us, like, what is our roadmap for agility? How do we become agile? And our coach told me, your team's doing everything you should be doing the way you're doing it. You're already agile. You don't need me. And he left. And that really made me very proud, I think, but also I was very curious, like, what the heck is this person talking about? And so it was at that point I started researching, what is it? What is this agile thing from the core values, principles, and then ultimately practices, which, as we know, in most enterprise environments, has been deployed in a Scrum framework of one flavor or another. So that's how I became aware of this idea of agile and the things that were springing up, spawned by the Agile Manifesto authors and the work that they did after publishing the manifesto. So what is Agile? We have another 4 hours to talk about, people, so get comfortable.
Actually, it's very nice that you have the story like that, because, for example, I have similar story. And when I'm retrospecting, I think that maybe this time around 2010, maybe it's from one side of the thing is the time when the teams in software industry were mostly agile, because back in the time when they invented the manifesto, they were tackling the corporate, cubicle type of working, etc. But for example, for myself, I also met Agile around this time in 2010 and so, when we were small software teams. So we were a team of 5 people at most, sometimes even 3 and 2. So such kind of small team it's naturally agile, because we share, we plan, we are constantly swarming on problems. Yes, maybe sometimes from some aspects the DevOps stuff were not so, let's say, well evolved, so some kind of infrastructure was a bit slow. Sometimes we were not able to deploy fast and to produce code super fast, but on the other hand, we were really swarming and tackling stuff. In our case, we did not have agile coach. It's just the team lead of my team kind of heard from somewhere that there is such thing, and we started doing meetings every day, plannings from time to time, without, let's say, real structure or real Scrum or something like, or anything like that. It was just more, let's meet every day for a short minute of time to see what's the progress, and so and so. And with the time, different pieces here and there started coming. But now when I retrospect, I see this time that was very agile in its essence, because afterwards the teams start becoming larger, the corporations became bigger, the software tools became more complex maybe, and we added a bunch of complexity here, and agile became a topic, like a huge thing to be done, maybe in the later years. I don't know, how do you see it, but this is my view of the history, let's say.
Yeah, I think the big milestone or transition period started as you're describing it, when people were asking how to scale things, right? And I know that infamously or famously, there's been a lot of attempts to solve that once and for all. But that's the big change, right? From individual software teams working on individual product or solution, finding ways to be agile naturally in sort of the human social context, right? And I follow many of the great people who had authorship participation. I guess it was 16 or so folks in the manifesto. But I followed Alistair Coburn a lot personally because I just found him more accessible, the way he presented things. And he's often focused on the natural social elements, right? The human cooperative game of building software. And so, yeah, I think that's a very fair narrative of, in a natural environment, teams can find their own way to agility without necessarily following a recipe, for sure. If the people are, collaborative and enjoy working together, they'll find ways to be agile.
This is very, very important thing to say, I think, because being agile is nothing new. It's something that was actually uncovered. It is part of human nature, human behavior. And sometimes we have hard times. And I'm sure you know, Kim, we had such hard times explaining to managers, people, leaders, etc., that agile is not the new recipe or the new methodology or the new process that you should learn and start checking boxes to implement. But it's something deeper than that. Okay, then I'm curious, Kim, how did you become inspired to go into that direction, into agility and helping organizations become agile? Because this is what you kind of do right now, right?
Reflecting on it, I'm smiling because I'm almost a little shy about it in professional environments. But what I experienced, what led me down that path, and what in retrospective is clear to me, is I love people. I love people. I love working with people. I love helping people excel at what they do. I love having people that didn't believe that they could collaborate effectively towards some kind of objective actually do that. And so I think it boils down to, I just really love working with people and helping people be successful. I do think there's a lot of we have an innate ability to do that, but there's a lot of obstacles and constraints that arise as a natural course of organizational programming, organizational structures and process and so forth. So yeah, I think it boils down to just love seeing people be successful and enjoy being together, right? We're stuck together depending on your work environment for 8 to 12 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week during peak periods if you're in delivery. So it can be very intense and very stressful for people. So I just like seeing people be successful and relieve some of the pain maybe. And I've always found that, to me, Agile values, principles, practices, and the related focus on customer value, as long as those things remain sort of the navigational stars for a team, they will find their way to work successfully together and find a way not to be miserable. I know that's like a negative incentive, but I think finding ways to not be miserable is not a bad way to describe what I've seen happen over and over again in teams that have to reach a challenging objective.
But usually what we see is that people are, the teams, they're mostly focused on doing the stuff and how to do the things right. Are we doing the right Scrum? Are we doing the right whatever? And they not so often focus on, are we doing the right things? Or as you said, are we focused on the value? Are we delivering value? So more or less, we're still trying to be just a bit more efficient feature factory or something like that.
It's really, I hate to use such a fancy word, but it's performative, right? It's performative. It's wanting to demonstrate to our leadership, to our organization, to our peers, that we get it and we're doing the thing, whatever the thing is. Pick your favorite framework or methodology or process. And it's an expectation that it's natural. It's natural. We want to conform and comply to the expectation that's presented to us. So, I work with a lot of young people through public education in my community. And one of them, as a 16-year-old, said something that he had learned. He said, what we focus on, we magnify. And I think this is something I see every day in every way ever since I heard that 15 years ago or so. We focus on those things. We focus on the framework, on the process, because it's clear. And I can quantitatively say I either met or did not meet the expectation.
All right. Well, we cleared why agile or agility is important to us personally, but we saw that in the past, let's say, decades, organizations are looking to become more agile, and they are putting the agile label, maybe some for marketing reasons because it's modern something, but some organizations really do want to become agile. So what are the benefits that organizations expect towards moving to agile, let's say, transformation?
I'm grinning again. This, by the way, this is fun. Maybe good therapy for me as well. I'm grinning because I'm going to be very particular and be annoying. I apologize. When we say what organizationals expect or organizations think they want, or they don't, they have no brain, right? It's the leaders, individual leaders or teams of leaders who have some idea or expectation. So I'm going to change your question and answer that question. I think that executives at any level tend to, when they hear a pitch, usually maybe from a consultancy or some sort of improvement organization, a pitch around agility or agile for whatever function. But as we know, I think primarily this came out of technology groups, IT groups over the years, and has been expanding out from there. And so often when they hear that, first they're kind of tone deaf. They're like, oh, that's the technical guys, that's that stuff. They don't think of it in terms of a traversal set of values and principles that could be applied to almost any kind of discovery or new kind of endeavor. And then this next thing, if they tune in and they get interested for some reason, the next thing they think and they sort of hear, maybe not what's being said, but what they hear is, wait a minute, you're telling me that I can get the stuff that I want faster. And I'm sold. Sign me up. And that sets up, I think, a false expectation that foundationally sets up most transformation efforts or consultative engagements around agile or digital transformations to be suboptimal. Maybe not fail, but not reach their objectives. And I say that because my reaction to that proposition of I'm going to get what I want faster is no, you're not. You're not going to get what you want faster. If we're successful, we're going to deliver higher value sooner to your customers, your clients, your stakeholders, whoever that happens to be, the beneficiary intended. You may not get what you want faster, but you'll get what is needed or of higher value sooner. It's very different things. It's a subtle difference. So I think executives here, I'll get my stuff faster. And
but this is still not so bad because we've seen very funny cases. For example, one guy once told us, you know what, come and do your agile mambo jumbo magic voodoo stuff, and I just want to understand when my people lie to me. Because now I'm sure they're lying to me about deadlines and stuff, and I want to be able to catch them. So do your agile stuff and make me able to catch when they lie to me about stuff and which I don't understand. And similar cases, we've seen all kinds of reasons that are having nothing to do with agility or with the agile mindset, but people have said do agile and make these people do something or behave in some way. Have you had this kind of cases, and why do you think it happens,
Wow. I first of all, I hope that engagement was short and as
It wasn't. It was just a discussion, but it happened, you know.
because that sounds excruciatingly painful. There's a lot of concerns, I would say, I see in that type of motivation, and it points to me like a macro problem. And first of all, a disclaimer: public service announcement for your viewers. I've been born and raised in the United States. I studied in Europe briefly for my master's. I'd like to think I'm a relatively culturally savvy person, but everything I say is in the context of U.S. enterprise. I've never worked for non-U.S. enterprise, so I don't want anyone to take anything I say as like overextended into other environments, other economies, or other cultures. But for U.S. enterprises, where I've made my bread for these past few decades, what I've seen evolve in parallel to this agile growth and agile movement and the desirability of agile, even if it's performative, is a decrease, I'm sorry to be frank, a decrease in effective management. Management itself as a discipline has gotten really, really weakened, I would say, in my tenure in the profession. I think management has become devalued, right? If you guys are pretty young, but you may remember it used to be MBA. MBA was the thing. Long before the Agile Certificate Industrial Complex or anything like that, if you could crank out an MBA, you were guaranteed a good job, a good salary, and whatever your age or experience, you were listened to, or people might expect to listen to someone. Oh, they have an MBA, and there was this idea that professional management was a very important, essential element to organizational success. I think that's less and less the case. The perspective is less and less. So the inability of that person to manage their people, to manage their organization, to have basic operational transparency, visibility, trust, any of these kind of essential elements of effective management organizationally, we'll never talk about agility in that environment. So this is bad management. Sorry to say. I hope you're not listening. I don't mean it personal, whoever you are.
Do you think that the agile movement somehow, let's say, affected this decrease in the quality of management?
That's interesting. I really don't know, but it raises a thought about too often the agile transformation, agile gurus would show up at a company and talk about flattening your organization and pushing down decision making, which are good things and done well and done right. But there's this idea that we no longer need management, that we no longer need quote command and control. And I think taken to the extreme, that becomes problematic. So maybe there's a causal relationship there. I haven't thought about it that way.
I've seen similar things because, as you said, the idea is to reduce command and control, but it should not mean to remove all the subject behind. If for example, we take the PM book, the PM book of knowledge, they have 10 or 12 areas of expertise that they do. There are a bunch of things that need to happen, and you need to think of procurement, communication, etc., etc. And you cannot just say we kind of ignore these things. We don't need to be expert in these areas anymore because we reduce or remove the command and control. And this is what happens. People are just jumping into the maybe agile world somehow, and they forget that there are a bunch of areas that we still need in order to be successful as organization. And as you said, maybe in our examples of similar asks, like I want to know my people how they're not lying, this is maybe something like that. And what we see in Bulgaria, because you talk about US, but we're going to talk also about Bulgaria and not maybe Eastern Europe, is that very often managers, they are actually entrepreneurs and people that have created the company, and very often they don't have any real education in management. They are just self-educated. This is what we see sometimes.
I can imagine, and that's exactly what I was trying to highlight, is that the professionalism in management seems to have degraded over time, and maybe in some cases that you're describing doesn't exist. It's not a discipline that's been developed in any way. Essential.
And this, I suppose, is one of the obstacles when you talk about transformations, isn't it? Because when management is not educated enough, it's hard to convince them what we're trying to do and why it makes sense, right? And to Kim's point about some managers falling for speed, for deliver more stuff in less time, I think the Agile community did it on its own, because we all know about Jeff Sutherland, one of the creators of Scrum, written a book that is called Half the Work in Half the Time, right? It's not
twice the
the
work in half that.
Twice the
oh,
work.
sorry. Do twice the work in half the time, exactly. Not twice the value in half the time.
Yeah. I mean, when we look at, first of all, Jeff and JJ, great human beings. They've done a lot for the community at large. But I would say the trap that I've seen, and I think you're hinting at, is that working with the time boxing that's essential to Sprint as a framework can create sort of a grind where we're not looking up. We're not looking at the higher level value that's sought. We're not looking at the bigger strategic result or impact we want to make. We're focused on that burn down. We're focused on stories or points or meeting the commitment. Early on, there were anti-patterns. I noticed, I mentioned I was starting to pay attention. What is this Agile thing? And then I came across Scrum right away, of course, as the first, search results on the web, even back in 2010. Immediately you see the rigor and the disciplines involved, and Jeff and his team and the framework promoters have always made it clear that this is sort of a infrastructure to build upon, build your own practice. And what I've seen is people just take the book, take the Scrum guide. If you're lucky, they implement that with fidelity. Usually they don't, but maybe they do it with fidelity, but they don't really do anything else. They don't invest in their own practices. They don't build on those framework elements to get to the value. And then you fall into the trap of just going through the grind, going through the performative motions, having more and more pressure put on the team, more and more pressure put on the sprint goals and time box. And it's basically a version of hell on earth.
So we managed to weaponize everything, and about this thing we sometimes call it the never-ending hamster wheel, because you became part of you're just rotating, and as you said, you're not looking around a bit more. But still, why do you think after so many years, still really a lot of people kind of, let's say, equalize Scrum and Agile?
Well, I think there's a few reasons for that, and we've referred to some without calling it that. I think it has to do with the way we access information. As I said, I wanted to find out about Agile. I go to the web, I do a search, top search results, Scrum. Also, it's because it is a well-defined framework. The founders, the authors, originally they credit the gentleman's name escapes me now, but the new product game, the Harvard publication, the authors of that,
Takeuchi
Nonaka, yeah. They credit those thought patterns to inspire their framework for Scrum. And so my point is, it's very well defined. It's very clear. You can go to it. It's sort of scripture. You can find it's defined. Here's the 10 commandments of Scrum. If you're doing these things, you're doing Scrum. And I think they recently removed the holistic thing. It used to be you have to do all of this or it's not Scrum. And so I think that's the second reason it was so successful early on, was the clarity. It's relatively easy to install. Bogi may remember this. I always used to refer in our training sessions at Coca-Cola that to me it's like a game of chess. The rules are really not complicated. Very, very easy. I could teach someone chess in about 15 minutes. They're going to be terrible at it, most likely, for indefinitely unless they invest a lot of effort in developing an understanding of the fundamentals of the game, the strategies involved, and broadening their mastery of the real game, not the rules. The rules are not the game. So I think it's easy to get the rules, install the rules, follow the rules, and still be terrible at the game. So
let's clear it also to the audience. Maybe not everyone is familiar. Maybe we have people that are asking themselves this question. So Agile is not Scrum. Scrum is not Agile. Agile is the mindset, the philosophy, the idea behind the game. And let's say Scrum is one of the tools, one of the frameworks, one of the games that you can play with that mindset. But it's really not everything, and it's very popular because, as Kim said, it's very easy to start to learn the basic rules, but it's still a tool. And you cannot just say Scrum equals Agile, because it's a whole big, deep philosophy that we have behind agility, the ability to be agile, and this thing to run the hamster wheel,
And we mentioned the Harvard publication, the new product game. I think it's important to remember that piece, that publication, and Jeff and Sutherland and Patton were developing a framework based on that thinking, and specifically for new product development. And I think that some people would say you can apply Scrum to anything. I'm not one of those people. I think there's certain things that's really well suited for, and some things not so much. Whereas the Agile values and principles are almost universal to me. So I think that's another way to sort of distinguish.
Can you give examples? Where do you think Scrum is more suitable? Where is not?
I think by definition, and I hope I'm not out of sync with the godfathers of Scrum, but for me, it is refined and tuned for discovery, new products. We don't know. The horizon we have is 2 weeks or less on average. We don't know what we're going to do in 3 or 5 or 10 or 12 weeks. That's another sort of anti-pattern I saw early on when Scrum was spreading throughout enterprises where I was working in digital or IT departments. Program managers and project managers would say, we're doing Agile, we're going to adopt Scrum. And then you would see a 6 and 12-month sprint schedule with everything planned out by sprint. And it made no sense to me then. It still makes no sense to me now, because I think that's a misapplication. You would have, say, it depends on the life cycle of the product, the digital product. If you have a very mature product that's been built and deployed in production, supported, operational, maybe you aren't going to get major benefits from Scrum. I'm not saying you can't use Scrum to manage the maintenance life cycle of your product, but you're not going to get like this huge ROI that's promised by Scrum. The ROI comes when you're doing new territory, greenfield, new development. So specifically, back to the story about AT&T, there's existing products and services that we were commissioned to replace, and we had accountability for both. So you can work in a mode, in the support mode, on one of the existing or mature products, and then work in this discovery or new product development mode where Scrum really applies and gives you leverage, the value. That's the only example that I think makes sense to me. I've seen Scrum applied to everything. And
in the end, Scrum is a tool, right? You can use the tool, and maybe you can find other benefits of using it, not the original intention when it was created. But nevertheless, Scrum is evolving. Also, Agile is evolving. And what we see is that Scrum and Agile, they originate from making a team highly effective and productive, and especially IT team. But nowadays, we're talking about organizational agility. So it's extended its meaning from just one team, 5 people or 10 people working together on a product. We're talking about, and not just IT teams, we're talking about whole organization being agile. And I think this is one of the problems that we are facing as agile experts, to convince people first that agile ways of working and thinking are no longer just something exclusively for IT people and IT teams, but something that is applicable in a broader context.
For example, even the Scrum fellows, they try to remove all kinds of strictly software related stuff from the guide, but still it's too late. I mean, it's everyone, you cannot just change couple of words and to say, you know what, Scrum or whatever is now for everything. It's just not working. Maybe we need to somehow redefine how it is, because if we apply, as Bogi said, agility, we can make people that are to be great teams and to deliver great goals. So this is the agility, the business agility. But what these teams are doing as subject, is it IT or not IT? That's not really important if we talk about agile. But if we take Scrum and things like that and try to remove couple of words and to change them, in safe is the same thing. PI, planning, is now planning increments. Before that it was planning interval. Before that it was, they're changing the words in order to make it more open, for more generic. But I'm not sure it really works, because we really face this problem that we go to people and we start talking about agile and they say, IT stuff, go talk to my CTO there. So it's very difficult. Maybe we need to redefine it, to invent new word, or I don't know. What do you think?
I'm sorry, I just had a flashback. I don't know, Bogi, if this was during your tenure when we were colleagues. Oh, it was prior to. I was at a bottling organization, the North America Bottling Organization for Coca-Cola System. And I had a team. I was taking over the development app dev group for the bottler. And what had been the project managers were so excited. This was mid-teens, 20 teens, 2013, 14, 15. They were so excited because it was really like the real upswing of Agile and Scrum sort of expanding rapidly, even geometrically around the globe into enterprise, and especially in product development, digital product. So they were super excited that I was hired. A new position was created. You'll love the title, Agile Execution Manager.
Oh my God.
When I
How many people
myself,
did you execute?
Yeah, exactly. I came in and introduced myself to the team members as they didn't include the axe and the hood. I'm sorry, but I'm here to execute Agile. So they were so excited, though. And what happened was it devolved. It regressed so quickly into debates about, should the stand-up ever be more than 15 minutes? Is the Scrum Master a dedicated job? All these kind of nuances back in the early adoption of Scrum. It got so insanely distracting. I banned the word Agile from our team. I said, no one will ever use that word from our team, because it was upsetting, confusing our clients internally, our app dev peers and our business partners, because they saw all the confusion even within the teams about arguing what is Agile. It misses the whole point, and it undermined our credibility. So I banned the word. You'd be very proud of me, Bogi. I was like, no, we cannot use that word anymore. It's like the word love. What do you mean, love? What is love? What is Agile? I don't know. Let's talk about it. Let's debate. And so I think it's important to focus on, always go back to the core values and principles. And I also have learned over time to really focus on the value portion and the customer portion of the practices and principles. That value proposition is for somebody. Somebody out there is expecting, hoping for, needing some kind of results. If we focus on those things, we can back into the right practices, the right things, without labeling it as this framework or this Agile, not Agile.
So
these have not done us any favors.
You removed the most favorite game for every Agile in the Agile world, to point at something and to argue, this is Agile, this is not Agile, this is the maybe most favorite game that we've seen, people pointing at something. And calling it agile or not agile. It's yeah. How
And
could you remove this pleasure?
to be honest, I believe this is also one of the things the agile community worldwide, globally, did to shoot itself in the leg and in the foot, to argue constantly about such kind of things that don't matter. They don't provide any value, to argue about definitions, about words. And senior managers and leaders become confused because they hear their favorite agile coach or whatever person talking about one thing, then they hear somebody else talking about the same thing but in different words, or explaining it in different ways. They become confused, and it creates basically confusion and chaos.
I would blame again Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber exactly because of what you said before, that they've said if you don't do everything as it said, it's not Scrum. So we started this constant argument: is it really Scrum, or it's Scrum but Scrum but not Scrum? And maybe this opened this Pandora box of pointing at stuff and calling it agile or not agile.
And we spent many years going down that route in my micro example. That's why I was like, okay, enough. We're not saying that word. We're not debating this. It's undermining our credibility in front of clients and management. You mentioned Schwaber. I said Patton earlier. I apologize. Schwaber and Sutherland, not Sutherland.
Yeah, anyway.
Different hero.
They are gonna watch when they watch the podcast. I'm sure they will appreciate it. That
well, I'm sure
giving them the credit.
Absolutely, and I think the reason maybe psychologically I mentioned Ken Patton is because his focus on product and product management, and I keep sort of steering our conversation towards the value side of agility as a set of values and practices on the product side. The conversation we just had, I was listening to the words we're using, and it was a lot about talking, about an agilist talking to another agilist, a coach arguing with another coach. You know what we're not doing when we're doing that? We're not listening. We're not listening to each other very well, and we're certainly not listening to our customers. We're certainly not listening to the client. It's suicide. It's suicide.
Also about removing the word agile, and so we usually have two scenarios sometimes. The first one is when you say agile, it really opens doors for you. There are such companies where agile, you can use it like on like a flag, and everyone is like, oh, agile, and they're just using the word is it's really opening doors for you. And they're also the other way. Companies that have tried many wrong things, like for example, this guy that wanted us to help him get his people to when they lie to him. So maybe he has tried several ways of getting to this goal, and at some point organizations like that really forbid and abandon the word agile. And if we go work with company like that, we really struggle to find words that they don't have this ghost spirit of the back of the previous agile transformation.
There's a lot of burned earth, at least in
Exactly.
American enterprises, I would say, that I'm familiar with. There's a lot of burned territory where agile transformation efforts of one type or another have been tried, were less than successful, maybe even disruptive. I know we're all familiar with this change fatigue concept, right? Change fatigue can set in no matter what we're talking about, agile, not agile, whatever. But because some of these were such large investments of time and maybe consulting agreements with some of the big groups, and the attention, the poor, again, as I introduced myself, I thought about focusing on the people layer, right? The poor people that we all know and have worked with that are just desperately trying to do something useful, just that's all they want to do. Then they get pulled into this transformation effort, either through external consultancies or internal change in leadership. Hey, I have a new direction. We're going to go be digital. We're going to be agile. We're going to fill in the blank. That creates so much stress for the people who are just trying to do the job. And I don't know about environments you've worked in, but for me, I can't remember an environment in an enterprise or professional working environment, commercial environment, where there was not enough work for the people to do. Everywhere I've ever been, there's more work than they can do. So anytime we're talking about change of any kind, we're already putting a burden and stress on people. And I think that also makes that our practitioners and agilists and enthusiasts who are championing this type of thing in companies sound completely disconnected and unempathetic in those environments. It's like the person saying, yeah, I hear you, that sounds lovely, but I'm actually, I need to, can you come back tomorrow or after 4, or, I have things to do. So I think that just accelerates that bad taste or bad experience at an individual level, that organization.
I agree, and this is one of the, let's say, nightmares that all of us are facing constantly. But okay, let's discuss, gentlemen, if you agree, for the audience's sake and also for me as well. I would like to have this conversation. Let's first answer the question: why should organization bother to invest into business agility? What is the fundamental need? Okay, some managers, maybe they heard some presentation, they believe it's something cool, that's something going to help them produce faster software, whatever products. But I'm not sure if it's the only thing first. And let's answer this for also people who are outside of the IT area that are wondering about what is the fuss all about? What is this business agility all about? What do you think?
Yeah, the first thing that pops to mind is probably not one of the first things that people think of most of the time. First, it depends on your context, assumptions, but assuming we're talking about digital and delivery, I know we want to expand that, but that's the heritage, right? That's the heritage where these sprung up from. Risk reduction is one of the immediate benefits for any organization that's dealing with the complexity of delivering digital products. And the idea of risk reduction, I almost never hear that brought up, certainly not at the first conversation about the benefits of agility for my organization, for example. But the amount of wasted effort, I don't know if it's my Scottish heritage. I don't know if I did mention that in my introduction. My father was from Turkey. My mother's family is from the US, but primarily Scottish heritage. I don't know if it's the stereotypical, frugality of the Scots, but I hate waste. I hate to see all the humanity wasting effort, energy, goodwill in a lot of the complex and stress-filled product development that we're talking about. So I'd say risk reduction, getting quicker to what not to do, is the first benefit.
I would say, how I see it, business agility is the ability of our business to be adaptive, to deal with the ever-growing complexity in the business world. We see lots of complexity, we see market changes, we see competitors, and we need to be adaptive and agile. You need to be flexible. And so business agility looks something that makes sense. If your business is able to be agile, if it's able to be adaptive and to deal with in the growing complexity, that's a good thing, right? It's something that we want to achieve. And what does it mean? It means that if part of our business tackles something like, again, complexity, some kind of change in the world, some kind of competition or whatever. This could be our marketing team, our business people, we can develop products of any kind, software or not software. So if we get with this need to get this ability, now the question is the mindset behind the manifesto, for example, or similar philosophy, is it going to help us get this ability? Because for the audience, the Agile Manifesto and the Agile Mindset, it's about working in teams. It's about focusing on a value on the first hand. It's about putting the customer in the center. It's about delivering fast and in a small intervals, small pieces of value, so we can learn from the experience, retrospecting and improving all the time. If you ask me, all this stuff, they make sense to achieve that goal. I don't know.
Totally. And Nikola, I would take what you've said and abstract it a layer up with total credit given to somebody else who helped me think about it this way. I would promote to you and your listeners a publication titled Sense and Respond. It's Jeff Gotthelf and Josh Seiden are co-authors. They're the Lean UX guys, published that book as well. Big fan of their thinking. I've hired them in some of my roles to help bring clarity to these type of questions. And in that book, Sense and Respond, I believe they bring to like a meta level what you just described. We're in this VUCA world, right? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. What's our response to that? Chaos, reactive, run, hair on fire. No, it's a very disciplined, agile way of interacting and surviving and hopefully thriving in those environments. And in their Sense and Respond book, they talk about this, there's no new thing under the sun, first of all, right? I was talking, I don't know if it was you, Bogey, but I was speaking to someone about Pappy Boeington, an American fighter pilot. It wasn't Pappy Boeington, different pilot. It was Boyd. Boyd was the pilot. So the OODA loop is, this idea of observing your environment, orienting yourself to that environment, making a decision, and then acting based on that. And so the reason I bring that up is, it's a cliche to say that combat, certainly fighter pilot combat, is about as complex and risky and uncertain of an environment as you can imagine. And so I think this idea that you described about response to the ambiguity, the complexity, and so forth, defining what at its heart what Agile is to bring to businesses, regardless of the function, is on point. And I think it's something that we faced as far back as memory can serve in human experience. And so that's why I bring up this OODA loop, PDCA, all of these things are, I think, a response to the complexity and the challenge environments, which only have accelerated in the digital age for sure. But yeah, I think it's very clear logically to reach the conclusion that you've proposed that agility at its heart is a way to respond to that kind of uncertainty and complexity of the environments we work in, whether it's a business function, a nonprofit function, even a government function.
And I cannot see any. Do you know any other philosophy that actually makes more sense in this case? Because I don't see. I think it's the only solution that we have.
I think it's 100% natural. We started out our chat today talking about the human or humane dimension to agility, which I'm very rooted in and value. And I think it is a social human endeavor, and we're very good at that. If left to our own devices, humans are very good at self-organizing, optimizing how they respond to threats, risk, or uncertainty in the environment. So yeah, totally agree.
So if the philosophy makes sense and we agree that's it, that we need, and then now the conversation goes into the tooling. Maybe here is the problem. Because we try to copy paste maybe Scrum that is meant for software into places that it's not, or maybe we just misuse something. Why do you think in many organizations agile transformation is as a whole is a bad word, bad known as well?
Well, I think part of it is the track record of marginal success or maybe even failed efforts. But I think that this goes to why is it so hard? I mentioned Alistair Coburn earlier. I heard him in a recording. He had an engagement with the finance industry in London. So imagine a bunch of bankers stereotypically maybe some of the most conservative, long-standing business people. He did his presentation, and then there was Q&A. And one of the first questions, if not the first question, was, can you tell me, in your experience, sir, an example where an enterprise of any size or scale is successfully transformed to become an agile organization? And he said, no. And then he said, well, I can think of one. And it was kind of a medium-sized company. And the leader was very committed and sort of autocratic. And he had a town hall, and he told everyone, we're going to leave the building, and no one's coming back in the building unless they're committed to becoming agile. He said, so, I mean, we're talking about someone who is, more deeply steeped in these domains than practically anyone that I know or have come across. And he's telling us, at that point, this was some years ago, he had never seen a successful enterprise transformation. So why is that? Why does this wonderful, natural, team level way of working and mindset, why is something that effective, powerful, natural for us so difficult at an enterprise? I think that's the question. That's what
Exactly.
my question has been as an organizational leader for many years, is why is this so hard, and how do we respond?
Maybe it's about the wrong expectations here, because we've, even in our personal experience, we've faced that. We've been in engagements, we work with companies in transformation, and we don't achieve the success in terms of the agile nirvana that we always sell and we talk about. But actually, if you take a look, like in a near time period, what many things changed, and even in the worst engagements where we can say we did not really make the good job and the transformation did not go well, we see a lot of progress in many directions, and it's just not what we want to happen, but it's maybe it's the reality. Perception is our problem. I've also seen what Alistair, what he has responded in this Q&A as the following: the successful transformation usually comes when you just create a new company and you put the people that you want in the new company, and there you have the dream agile super nice company, and the others, the rest, they just stayed in the old company and they continue doing whatever they're doing, yes, improving with some steps, but the real agile nirvana goes in the new company where you just said it from the beginning.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know, Bogi, I just shared recently the consultancy that's published a zero-based redesign of your organization. I think you just summarized it.
And you're a big fan of it.
I'm a big fan. I think there are there's some truisms or truths buried in that. One of the things, even back when we were colleagues in Coca-Cola, that I had in mind in our programming and that I talked to leadership about was, trying to take an existing infrastructure of any kind and retrofit it. Like, let's remodel our home. Nightmare versus building a new home. Not exactly always easy, but definitely easier than retrofitting, right? Notorious for anyone who's gone through any small, even just, let's renovate the bath, let's renovate the kitchen. Much more difficult to do renovations. I think the metaphor applies to organization. It is much more difficult. So yes, I could see where it's appealing to say, let's start with a clean slate. There's obviously some serious implications to that of all sorts, but that makes perfect sense to me. It's easier to build new and not fight the resistance, whether it's infrastructure, bad wiring, or anything like that. Better to start new.
It's not.
That's the luxury, though. That's the luxury.
It's not said that you need to abandon the old organization. You can still keep it. You can still dedicate it to something, part of the business or whatever. And you also need to continuously work to improve it. But to achieve the nirvana thing, you really need the new building sometimes. Maybe. Otherwise, maybe it will take, 100,000 years to get to this place with small.
Perhaps you never get there. Perhaps you never get there. Maybe that's really the reality.
Okay, so we're getting somewhere. Okay, let me recap what we discussed. So I would like to point the conversation to a specific direction. So we wrapped up that business agility is something that's needed, right? So organizations need it in order to reduce risk and to thrive into the VUCA world. There is no alternative to it, if we agree to that. Or is it, Kim?
Well, I mean, floundering, you just do the best you can. No strategy is still, you operate. But yes, sorry, I concede the point.
Yeah, this is the idea, because I'm thinking about our audience. Okay, if there is a manager who thinks to himself or herself, should I go towards down this path to invest in my organization to evolve it into an agile organization? What is the benefit for me? We are agreeing that, well, basically this is either do it or you are not going to exist longer or long enough.
I know we don't want to digress too much on this, but I mean, I could say a leadership team would say, oh no, we need to be a service-oriented organization. No, we need to be a customer-centric organization. No, we need to be a product-centric organization. So I do think there are alternatives that consultancies and executive teams pursue that are not agile as an alternative. I just want to put that out there.
Okay.
There are alternatives. But to your point.
No, I'm thinking, when you say those things, do we say that agility is kind of overarching term that is consisting of those things as well? The customer centricity part of thing. Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, this to me is it should be. One of the common threads through our conversation today has been about ways of working, mindset, behaviors. All of these things are about individuals, not necessarily about the structure. And so I think one of the big sort of divergent paths that organizational leaders can take are we focused on our people and our culture, or are we focused on processes and structure, like the anatomy of the organization, and changing that, tinkering with that, versus our people, our culture, our way of working, our mindset? So I think there's a really important divergence that I've seen where leaders will tend to focus on one or the other when both are necessary to be effective, right? So I think when we traditionally an agile transformation, other than the team tinkering, like, oh, we have to build a team with a certain kind of role of a certain size. They can't have 3 pizzas. They can only have 2 pizzas, and they can only have 3 toppings, right? They can't have the everything pizza. That's not an option. So there's the tinkering at the team level on the agile side, but mostly the agile side is about the values, principles, mindset, ways of working, whereas the organizational, structural process tinkering is a totally different path. They're interdependent. I would argue you have to manage both effectively. Going all the way back to the top of the podcast, effective professional management must deal with all of that.
Exactly.
So that's the only diversion I would say from there's not an alternative. I think there is, and I think a lot of leaders focus only on one or the other, and they need to holistically manage, deal with, invest in both.
All right. And now let's go to the direction of the conversation about, okay, let's discuss what organizations can do in order to start changing. What are the approaches that we've seen in our practice working? It's maybe something that our audience can try as well. And also what things are not working, what we have seen tried but failed. What are the obstacles? What are the nightmares of an agile organization? This is where I would like to steer this conversation.
Yes, it gets scary. Let's make it. Yeah, everyone loves a good horror movie.
Okay.
I think in my own thinking, what has changed the most since you and I were working together as colleagues is the recognition that the pace of change has not only continued, but it accelerates. The expectations for organizational performance have not only continued, they've increased. What I've also noticed is one of the single biggest success or failure elements, considerations is leadership. I know this is common knowledge. If you look at the implementation framework for safe and similar implementations, the implementation pathway, it starts with leadership team, the LACE, right? You have to establish clear priority, leadership, accountability, etc. So it's a cliche to say leadership's essential, but it is. And if there's a change in leadership, the amount of change that can bring in the middle of a transformation effort is 0 to 100. Anything's possible, including completely stopping. One of the things I've seen multiple times is declaring victory long before victory is achieved, simply because there's no more appetite to continue. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think the tenure and the commitment of a leadership team or individuals, whoever the champion and really the power center for an organization, it really depends so heavily on them for it to be sustained. If they're not in place for a number of years to see it through, or if their priorities are disrupted, then your transformation is at best suboptimal, at worst just kind of evaporates, and then regression happens, right? We tend to go back to the way we used to work when it's not reinforced for change. So I've come across this term. I don't know who to credit it to, but I love it. It's the mean time to leadership change. If anyone's worked digital and infrastructure, delivering and supporting systems, they know mean time to recovery, mean time to restore, MTER. It's one of the Dr. Nicole Fosgren, Jess Humble, those guys published Accelerate, the DevOps 4 key things. That's one of them, right? So similar to the mean time to restoration or restore, mean time to leadership change. What I mean is, if we have leadership teams or individuals who are the power center for the drive for change that have a tenure of less than 2 or 3 years, then by definition, you're not going to get to the nirvana that we've talked about, or even close to it. So I think that's the number one impediment I've seen, is the pace of change, even at leadership level, doesn't allow the focus effort to continue long enough to actually take hold.
Yeah. Is this the reason of the last, let's say, years layoffs in the Agile area, even in companies like version 1 and so? What do you think?
Well, and I think I've been employed at Discover Financial most recently, and just in the news recently, Capital One has made an offer to acquire Discover Financial. And Capital One famously, a year and a half ago, it was a little over a year ago, announced that they had successfully become agile at scale and sort of native agile, and therefore no longer required the services of, I think it was 1,000 plus agilists of one type or another. And so I think organizations will, to one degree or another, move on, right? Transformation, I think, in the future is no longer a program that has a project-based start and end date. I think it never ends. And I think that goes back to the management discussion. The successful management organizations at enterprise will be those that own this continuously.
And do you think this is the reason for the, let's say, for what we see about these layoffs globally now, that companies think that they are going to naturally somehow evolve and they don't need people to change them, to run the change?
Actually, I would speculate there's multiple reasons, and that's certainly one. I think another one is we have not, there's a overgeneralization, but we have to have a conversation, right? We have not collectively, as agilists, done a really great job of defining the value proposition and demonstrating the resulting value. So it's like, how do I know that I'm getting a return on the investment? I've focused in my career more and more on product management disciplines. And similarly, when you're delivering a product, there's 100 ways to measure success: quantitative, qualitative, forward-looking, trailing, and depending on your context, you may want to be looking at different things. But there's a pretty well-defined set of stages of product and the types of things that indicate progress or success at those stages of the product. I don't think we have that for agility.
Yeah.
We haven't developed the discipline to identify something that organizational leaders can hold on to and say, put their reputation on at risk, to say, in this quarter or this year, we're watching the following thing. It doesn't have to be a KPI, but something that is quantifiable or qualifiable that can be tracked, can be observed, and understood to be progressing, regressing, or stable. I don't think we've done that very well.
Do you think it's also
impediment? Sorry, Nikola.
No, I was just going to maybe make a connection to what you said with what I also and Bogi see is that the agile, let's say, industry has a little bit, let's say, evolved into some kind of certification machine where people are constantly being trained and certified and being just with 3 days announced as Scrum Masters and coaches. So isn't this kind of reducing the quality of what we produce as value? So basically, in general, people at some point, organizations at some point see that they don't get the return on investment. Also, because it's on one hand, we cannot define it and sell it. On the other, it's like we don't produce the return on investment because we just produce more and more agilists that are not prepared, not ready, because
incompetent. I think incompetent is the right word.
This agile certification business that appeared in the last years, it became a huge machine of producing stuff that people that really not behaving or not dealing with what they need to do.
And
what
when
do you
you,
think?
yeah, I think that I'm trying to think about how it compares to things like PMI, PMP certification. This is something that is the test of time. And I was a fairly early PMP certifying project manager back when that was my profession. And it wasn't too dissimilar. There were people who were like, oh, everyone's getting a PMP now. Having gone through many certifications of all types, including in agile spaces, much more rigor, I would say, involved in PMI certification than our certification. So, yeah, I think there is a diluting effect that has happened. And look, financial incentives have driven it. As long as companies are willing to invest in the positions, the salaries, the engagements, then people naturally would pursue it. The effectiveness, though, yeah, that's in question. And I think that too often, again, I sound like a broken record. We lose sight of why. What are we trying to accomplish? What is the value that's sought, and who's going to benefit? As opposed to becoming an expert in a subject and being able to talk endlessly about the finer points of this agile practice or that agile practice. It's like, so what? So what? Somebody has to benefit somewhere. So my journey has brought me to focus more on product management disciplines, customer centric. How do we know what the customer really needs? Because they tell us what they want? Well, it's a cliche, but they're like, what they say they want may not be what they really need, right? There's these ideas about the underlying job that needs to be done versus what they say they're trying to accomplish, and getting good at discerning the discovering and observing, concluding what is the actual thing, and being able to quickly experiment, discover. Early in our chat today, I was talking about risk reduction. That's an element of what I'm talking about. Is the risk is we're doing the wrong thing. Even if we're doing it well, if we're doing the wrong thing, we're kind of eventually going to fail. So I think that all the agilists in the world, so you could throw 100 agilists into an organization. If they lose sight of those questions, what is the value this organization is seeking? Who are the customers for this organization? What are the things they need accomplished? We're sorry to be vulgar, but it's kind of a mental masturbation to be trained deeply in agile certifications. So what?
And it's the first principle in the manifesto, right? So if you don't have the value of the customer as primary focus, or we're not really agile.
Can we say that this circles back to the one of the reasons why organizational transformations fail? Because the people who are hired to help with that are not really competent in executing it.
It's certainly one of the reasons. There's so many reasons that these type of efforts fail, right? I've developed a personal sort of lens to apply to what are the odds of success. And it has a great acronym. Maybe I should come up with a certification program and start pushing that. I call it CLOUT, C-L-O-U-T, CLOUT, right? Power, effect, ability to impact. And it's looking at the dimensions to change, leadership, organizational environment, upskilling, and any training that's required. So in any one of those dimensions, if you're deficient, really in any kind of capability building, but certainly in agile transformations and capabilities, if you're deficient across any of those dimensions, or if the organization isn't ready in any of those dimensions to receive the change, adopt the change, and partner in the change, you're kind of wasting your time. And you'll have, marginal localized successes, which have value in themselves, but it's not the ROI price level that's sought.
Cool. So I think we covered a lot. We are having what the food for thought even for us. I'd like to ask you then the maybe the very reasonable question. So now what? I mean, what's the future of Agile? What's the future of agility, business agility, transformations? And so how do you see it?
I personally believe that we'll see more and more of the position of enterprise leadership, that this is no longer an aspiration. This is how we must operate. In a recent organization, a CIO onboarded, and there was a transformation effort in progress, and they're a critical player, obviously, at the executive level. And they were asked, do you support or subscribe to this transformation way of agility? And their response was, that's the air we breathe. That's not an option. It's table stakes. And so I think there'll be more and more focus on this being standard way of operating as the aspiration internally that we have to continually and relentlessly pursue, and not a program that has a start and an end date, not a program that necessarily requires someone to tell us what to do.
I see.
We have to develop these disciplines internally as a competency and a capability with our people and in our structures and our processes that align better to these values and principles. That's organizational leadership and management. So to one degree or another, I think leaders are recognizing, I just had a thought. You guys are transformation experts and agile experts. We've always heard and talked about this permafrost, that middle management layer, right? We have the people are excited. We're going to be agile. We're very excited. Senior leaders, they want more stuff faster. They want to please, Wall Street or shareholders or investors. And then there's the people who are operationally accountable for executing day-to-day operations and delivery. That middle management layer is always viewed as maybe the last hill to climb, the most difficult hill to climb. What I'm saying in a way is that organizational leadership will no longer assess the quality of that middle management layer, say directors or senior managers, without this being part of the assessment of their capability, their competency as leaders in that organization. It has to become internalized. It has to become part of the job, if you will.
I would say let's get a bit more, let's say, practical. How to achieve that? How to achieve this successful transformation of the future? Let's say what we need to do.
This is so simple, but it's still one of the most powerful things that I've ever seen have a positive impact. We have to stop overburdening everyone. No one has time or attention to develop or change or evolve how they lead or how they work on average. And so this amount of work in progress, people being overloaded, that is the number one impediment on an individual basis and in the aggregate in an organization. If there's too much pressure, too much work in progress, it doesn't matter what we want to talk to them about. We could say you need to be bilingual. They'll be like, that's fine, I'm busy. We could say you need to be agile. That's fine, I'm busy. So I think being able to manage flow and having capacity for change of any kind will become one of the measures of an organization's effectiveness. Because as you mentioned earlier, Nikola, business agility requires the ability to be nimble in response to dynamic external change, competition, etc. By definition, it's never ending. By definition, it's undefined. And so you have to have a certain capacity to be able to have the attention to learn and adapt to whatever you're learning as you go through those environments. So I think that's going to be, for successful organizations, that's going to be one of the keys to success, is making sure, having real ways to measure and have insight into what is the level of workload, work in progress on our individuals and on our organizational units. And then that will that will create the space for people in their management teams to do what we've said people do naturally, which is work effectively, collaboratively, work with agility, work with ingenuity and innovative mindsets. So I think that's the essential piece that I think has to be centered to an effective org.
So we pretty much go back to, again, something that is well known from the past, and we reborn it somehow to start focusing on flow, reducing the load, giving some space to people to actually innovate and learn. And so as I think maybe you've seen the last SAFe framework 6.0. I think it actually talks a lot and primarily about flow. It's one of the main emphasizes there, that they need to focus on the flow when you're transforming, when you're implementing large scale stuff. You need to have the flow as your kind of first thing to work on.
Yeah, I think that, so how you asked what practical things can we talk about? I often, my last engagement, I was approached by the CFOs from all the different business units, and they're like, okay, what does this mean for us? How do we have to change? And I've always just tried to characterize it as a shift from managing budgets, being a budget management organization, to being of an investor's mindset. And what do I mean by that? An investor's mindset is decision-making around the business case and the potential ROI. I think many of your followers probably are familiar with the Amazon sort of business case, case on a page or two. PowerPoint is banned by Bezos and so forth. I think there's some wisdom in that. If you can't articulate a value proposition in a very straightforward way for the investment the company is being asked to make and what you're doing, then it's probably something we could say no to. And if it's not some sort of regulatory mandatory process, then ultimately we could always reinstitute it if it becomes evident after stopping that we should not have stopped. But I think a lot of work has to stop, and the most effective way I've seen to stop work is to stop funding. And so I think having business case mentality, investors mentality when it comes to annual budgeting and recommitting to budgeting on a recurring quarterly or annual basis is a very practical way to drive the work in progress down and to increase focus on the highest value work. Does it happen in one shot? No. but it's a discipline and a practice of what I would call an investor's mindset.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, do we need to formalize this kind of process for, let's say, qualifying what we are starting based on business case? How do you think?
Yeah, this is maybe a whole nother podcast, and it actually gets me kind of excited here. And it's not just the espresso talking. I think that underlying what you're saying is there has to be a strategy that drives our decision making, right?
Okay.
And so too often there's no strategy in place and we're just kind of going through the motions. So what do we measure our decisions against if there's no strategy? Well, politics, power, arbitrary. So yeah, I think it backs us all the way up to fundamentally what is the strategy for a given organization, whether it's a department, operational unit, or even at the enterprise level. What is the strategy for this organization and enterprise?
And how is this strategy created? How should it be created in the first place?
Did it ever exist? At some point, somebody had a vision for this company to exist, even if it goes back 135 years. Presumably that may have changed or evolved at least, but has it been curated? Has it been managed? Again, I'm a broken record. Professional management, key accountability for senior leadership in an organization is to maintain, protect, develop, and evolve that strategy. To enable things like decisions on investments. Should we do this or not? How do we decide?
Mm-hmm. And about the strategy for the transformation, what strategy you've seen more successful than others?
I think in our dialogue, I heard both of you refer to even when things didn't go well, you saw a lot of progress in an interim interval of time. That points me to what I've seen in my career, which is, again, this is about the people. And if you can affect the individuals to the degree that you affect and influence individuals to change where they are in their own role in their own part of the organization, that has an impact. It may not be acknowledged by the board of directors. It may not be acknowledged by, business periodicals. It may not become a case study, but that's having an impact. And so I've been, you saw in our work together, I very much focus on how do we influence people? How do we influence individuals? And this gets into sort of the, sense-making mindset and approaches and techniques of Kinevent and these type of recognition of the complex environments versus the complicated environments and making adjustments on what do you do in those environments. And so I think small efforts targeted towards influencing change can have a big impact. So wherever I've been in any organization, I've always focused right away on establishing communities of practice, getting people together and talking, making that part of the way that we work. That's another reason why flow is so important in work in progress. People have to have at least just 1 hour. Give us 1 hour a week to help develop and expand the hive mind of the networked brains trying to solve these problems and sharing what we've learned across the enterprise and having practices and success travel around the organization. I've seen nothing more effective than that. And that's the thing that people appreciate the most and that lasts, is sustained the most because it's in the people. Again, real quick, I talked about that major fork or branching. Like, do we focus on the people and the culture? Do we focus on the infrastructure, organizational design, and process? We must have both. But what I've seen when we're talking about a constrained environment, if you focus on the people and drive their upskilling, their understanding, that'll have the most lasting impact. Even after the consultative engagement has stopped, even after the transformation banner has been brought down and the fireworks have been, launched, mission accomplished, if you will, that'll have a lasting impact. So.
And earlier in this conversation, you mentioned the role of the leadership and the leaders, because, we can create communities of practice and we've done it, people got, let's say, excited. There are people who really want to do stuff, but in the end, if they are not supported by higher level management who don't care, don't believe. It's so kind of waste, and those people got or get frustrated, sometimes demotivated, sometimes even leaving the company. So what is the solution here? And this leads to the usual question about transformations. Should they be top down or bottom up, or somehow symbiosis between the two approaches?
Yeah.
Is there a right approach or not?
Yeah, I think the answer is in the question. I think it is all of the above and contextual, right? If you have aligned leadership that's committed, sustained, and prioritizes these things and reinforces the messaging. Well, let's back up. What was the message? Was there a clear statement of purpose? Was there a clear vision of how we know we are doing better at the thing you're asking us to do as our leader? If there never was a clear message up front, it kind of doesn't matter how committed the leadership is. I've seen organizational leadership exhibit like this is a priority. Like, here's our top 3 priorities, and agile transformation or agile ways of working is somewhere in there. It's almost never number 1, but it's in there because you have to be agile today. Everyone knows that, right? So it's in there. They reinforce it. It's in the messages. It's in the memos. It's in the PowerPoints. So even with that, if there wasn't a clear articulation of what it is we want to get out of this and how do we know we're progressing, I'm not sure that even the priority of leadership will get you there. It'll get funding. There'll be a lot of activity. There'll be a lot of staff working towards this effort or that effort, supporting it. But yeah, I don't know that that's the magic. So I think it's a little bit all of the above, but all of it depends on the clarity up front of what are we really trying to accomplish? What do we want to get out of it? And do we have a way of measuring our progress towards?
I would add to that, okay, right messaging and explanation about why we want to do this, what are the benefits we're expecting is crucial for sure. But I would say that management need to do stuff differently, not just be like broadcasters of messages and presenting on all hands meetings about what are the top current priorities, top 2, 3, 4, whatever, and then do whatever they were doing all the time during the past years. They should start doing stuff differently. What would be those stuff? This is where I would like to answer that question together with us here.
Oh, I love that question.
Because we've seen many managers who are proclaiming, etc., trying to motivate people how important it is to be agile, blah blah blah. But then what?
Yeah,
expect people to be.
Yeah, no, I love the thanking there. By the way, I missed our collaboration, so this has been fun, Bogi. I think that one of the most difficult things to ask leaders of any level, at any level, to do is to not know the answers. Like, they're presumably experienced in one or more disciplines of their industry, or they wouldn't be in a position of leadership. What happens, and I've been around a while, right? So what happens is we think we know, right? And when you know, and you hear people struggling with a question, our instincts are to be like, oh, I'll give it to you. I know the answer. We should do X. This is so corrosive on many levels. And for a transformation effort, if I was the head of an organization, I cannot carry that organization to that destination. The members of that organization will have to carry that organization to that destination. And as soon as I continue providing the answer, providing the direction on every question that comes up, I'm rendering impotent, or I'm removing the power and the agency of all the individuals in that space, in that organization, in that decision, in that direction. So I would say, first of all, there's a certain kind of humility, even if it's like, I do know the answer, but I'm not telling you. I want you to work through it. I'll guide, I'll keep you from going in a ditch, but I think there's a certain humility to no longer provide all the answers to operational decisions, even experimentation. What should we do next? So I would say that, Bogi, is just one example of demonstrating that an agile organization has to have as many members, hopefully all members, activated with this type of mindset, collaborative, curious, experimenting, leveraging the power of all of us rather than Kim said so. So
so
really,
empowering people, basically.
I like enabling because I believe that people have power already. It's kind of getting out of the way. I don't need to delegate to you the power. I need to stop broadcasting my power. And people will rise to that vacuum. People will fill that vacuum if they believe you. And how do they come to believe you? By your actions. So I think that's a practice discipline, right? You have to keep doing those sorts of things to create the space for people to come in and fill those spaces and become confident that you're not going to lash out or punish.
This is very difficult. This is very difficult. We've seen lots of people who are very great in many directions, but they really struggle with that. They need a lot of time to have this crack in their minds that they don't know the answer. Because, as you said, people, they're experienced in something, they have done stuff for years, they really have understanding about what is the right answer. And for us, it's super difficult to have this crack again in their minds that doesn't matter that you know what's the right answer. Actually, you don't know. That's a guess, that's a hypothesis, and doesn't matter how sure you are, that's still 99 whatever percent, but it's not 100% sure. And it's really a lot of struggle to have people understand that they don't know what will happen. That they know that they don't know. So that's huge problem usually.
This leads to the question: what is preventing those leaders to change their behavior? Because I'm sure they're smart people. To be a senior leader in an organization, you're a smart person for sure. And if somebody, a coach, 1, 2, 5 coaches explain to you the value of behaving differently and enabling people, and you still don't do it, there is a reason. And what is that reason?
Yeah, I was thinking similarly. And there's, again, context, enterprises I've been in, all US based, there's a lot of short-term pressure for performance and delivery. So if the three of us were working and one of us was the leader and the leader hears the other two debating something, a course of action that I already, the leader already knows, air quotes, knows the right answer, time is passing. We have to go. So I think there's pressure for speed and short-term view of success. So it takes a longer commitment. This is why I think this mean time to leadership change is such a problem. Because if I'm committed, but I'm not in place long enough to help my people develop and see me role model, giving the space, taking the time for the team to come and grab the leadership, if you will, on some decisions or direction of importance. If I'm not in place long enough to do that, the next person may not support that. And so it's very discouraging and can disrupt it, and people give up. So one of the things is, quick tangent, one of the things in U.S. corporations that I know is kind of assumed to be absolutely essential and is conducted in every major corporation is engagement surveys. You guys know an engagement survey?
Yes.
That aren't familiar, this is some sort of typically run out of an HR, human resource or people function, and it's an attempt through survey questions to determine, are our people engaged in their jobs? In essence, are they happy? Do they feel productive? Do they feel supported? All these type of engagement questions. And I think that it becomes very discouraging to people when they're continually asked if they feel enabled and empowered and engaged and all this stuff, when they don't see the behaviors that create the environment for them to do those things and to have that be the result. So this turnover really is affecting all people, but in leadership, people moving, there's a macro problem. If the latest career advice that we're giving young people moving into enterprise and commerce is if you no longer have a career path through this organization, there's no pension waiting for you or gold watch after 25 or 30 years. So for you to develop your experiences, for you to increase your earnings and be, quote, successful in your career, you need to change roles every 2 years on average. And if you want to get increased salary, the fastest way to do that is to leave your company and go to another company. So when we have that macro environment, where is this long-term sustained effort to change our culture, to change mindsets, to create the space for the type of enabled workers or teams that we're talking about? I don't know. I'm very skeptical. I got to tell you. So in that environment, then what do we do? I'll take your question even further. It's like, okay, if Kim's cynicism is based in reality or a trend that may be emerging, then what do you do? Well, then I think we have to focus on what I keep saying, the people, right? Wherever they go, people typically find value in adopting agile ways of thinking, agile mindset, even some practices and principles. So they're going to take that with them everywhere they go. So what I'm saying is we need to have the whole world indoctrinated into these ways of thinking and operating, and then eventually it'll just come out nice and even, and all companies will be agile.
Okay, I heard you.
A little bit glib.
No, I heard you about one of the, let's say, obstacles is the immediate wins or pressure, etc. But what we've also seen is, let's say, a bit different perspective. Sometimes ego comes into the game where the leader wants to be the one in charge who is giving orders and knows all the answers. And if you ask that person who really fought for it and this was his or her dream to be in that position, they don't easily let go of this. And also, I'm not sure if they want to lose their, let's say, renomme or whatever, personality. Other things that we've seen are the internal politics, because these new ways of working are going to impact some people's plans and how they currently do things in the organization, and they are secretly or not so secretly sabotaging the change.
Yeah, it's usually transparency, exposure, so people don't really like that always.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned a handful of things there, right? At the top was this idea of my ego and sort of my power. Maybe I'm comfortable in my, I immediately think of a feudal situation. I'm the local lord or lady of a manor, an estate, and I like things just the way they are. Maybe this is it. My career is at this level. I've decided I'm really not going any further, but I'm very comfortable here, and I'm going to control my estate within the boundaries of my domain. This is a major problem. So I think this is someone responding to their environment, and working on changing that person isn't going to do much more than potentially create friction that's unproductive. Make a quick analogy to Mother Nature, one of my favorite subjects. So here I'm in a suburban environment, but it's very mixed. We have wildlife of all sorts around us: deer, fox, coyote, etc. So people get very freaked out sometimes about the coyote, and they're like, we should have that coyote killed, or we need to call animal control. We need to get that coyote out of here. The problem is, as soon as you remove that coyote, another coyote moves in, because the environment requires it. I would say in an enterprise, the same is true. If you're working on that manager because they're the local lord or power broker, you're not going to solve the problem. The problem is the infrastructure, the environment, the conditions that created that to even be possible. So I don't know that I have an answer for how to interact with that person. I don't think you can drive change through that person. As you said, they could be passive aggressive, smiling, yes, we're on board with agility, and then actually either best case not doing anything, worst case actively undermining any other efforts. So I think the focus has to be away from the individual leaders like that and more about the system, right? What is the system that allows that to happen in an organization, which comes back to management and professional management and leadership, which is hard to find.
This is a vicious circle.
A vicious cycle. This is my focus, is like, how do we revitalize professional management in our enterprises? That's why I think that it may be a whole generation of leaders that have to come up native agile. Like a lot of the young folks, I was working with the internship program and many of the enterprises I worked with. I talked earlier about supporting public education initiatives in my private life. So I get to interact with a lot of young people. Guess what? They natively work this way. They natively have this mindset. So I think there's a lot of hope out there, I'd like to say. And I don't want to dwell on like that one obstinate Kim who's in his place and won't change and doesn't get it. I forget Kim. The environment's going to change. The environment's going to evolve, and so is the workforce.
Yeah, agreed. Well,
So there is a hope.
For those, there's a hope. But for those who are currently actively working in organizations, trying to change them or to make a difference, to make an impact, we've talked with a lot of people in the community, Scrum Masters, Agile coaches, who unfortunately are working in very low levels in the organization, on a team level, department level, tops, and then they have zero impact, zero visibility, zero connection with more senior leaders, and they're struggling. They're feeling helpless.
Having a nightmare.
This is a nightmare, of course, because the Agile coach role and the Scrum Master role is doesn't have authority to really make decisions, to really change stuff. They need to convince the right decision makers to actually behave differently. And if they don't have access to them, it's inevitable that they're going to fail.
Yeah,
I think this is one of the biggest reasons why most organizations are failing. First, in business agility or agility at all. And second, why the role of the Scrum Master and Agile coaches is being not so popular, let's say. People don't see the value of it. Managers are challenging what this person is doing. Why do we need that person? That person doesn't bring any value to the organization. Yeah,
definitely nightmarish, right? I think we've all seen that. I would say two things. One, sort of a short-term advice to an individual, right? We're talking as an individual. I told sort of my first exposure to the term agile and my pursuing as a result, what is that? Trying to figure it out. I was a technical project manager. Every day we were working on delivering or building infrastructure or delivering value through that infrastructure for some pretty ambitious, complex deliverables. I would recommend that people don't get too far away from that. Like, many agilists have come from digital spaces or technical backgrounds. To one degree or another, they may have retained the currency with those skills or not. I think it's really important that we don't allow ourselves to become that ivory tower agilist who might be perceived as looking down on everyone else and saying, oh, you're also foolish. You have to do things a better way. No one's listening to me. What is it? Does anyone know Cassandra, the prophetess in Greek mythology?
Yeah.
She was cursed because she could see the future and no one would believe her. That was her curse. Many agilists feel that way, right? And I've had coaching teams that I've built and supported as a manager. And too often agile coaches or scrum masters find themselves in a Cassandra role. They're like, I see what we need to do. I see where this is going, but no one's listening to me. I have no traction. So if at all possible, I would encourage folks in that situation to find ways to actually put hands on. In my own role, we heard this idea of servant leadership. It's talked a little bit less often than it used to be as being an important feature of leadership in general, but especially within that scrum master or coach role. The servant leader, what is a servant leader? The servant leader is the person who's willing to pick up the mop, not asking someone to go mop. And so I would encourage folks in that situation to actually do more of the actual hands-on work and show people. Don't just tell them how to be agile, show them how to be agile, whether it's helping with testing, whether it's helping with any kind of tasks that need to be chased down. Back in the early days, people sometimes just saw the Scrum Master as like the gopher. The things none of the developers wanted to do. Oh, Kim's the Scrum Master. We'll just have him do it. And Kim's like, no, I'm not doing that. So I think finding ways to occasionally brush up on your mopping skills and helping the team advance somehow, that will help at a local environment for that individual. At the macro level, I think that especially as people elevate in their role and their mastery of all things agile, need to think seriously about rejoining the operational and execution arms of companies. Instead of trying to change Kim, who's over there and doing it wrong, go and take that role. Again, at a higher level, show them how to lead a group of teams, show them how to foster an environment for people to be more agile and enabled. So that's the only two things I can think of, Bogi.
So just do it, right? This is what you're saying.
It can be
If you cannot...
Go down to earth. I mean, don't be too much agile guru, nirvana, just reflecting person. Do some kind of be down to earth, be like everyone else, and when there is something to be done, go and do it. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
People will
exactly.
see and learn from that. And I'd like to add one more thing if I could, and it may be, I don't know, the Václav Havel, very
we know
famous
him,
leader, right? One of the things he resonated so much with me is paraphrasing about hope. It's not the expectation or the optimism that things will turn out right. It's that doing the right thing is the what hope is. Doing the right thing in spite of what the result might be. And I think for people that have this insight, like the agile fire, if you will, they have this insight of, this is so much better than the way we've always done it. Why isn't everyone else doing it? You can't have the expectation that it's going to turn out for that team, that company, that department that you're in, but you should still maintain that enthusiasm and do the right things because it's the right thing to do, not because you expect it to change everyone else.
Awesome. Well, we already talked for 2 good hours that passed by super quickly, and it's usual with you, Kim, because you're so interesting person to talk to, and you always share stuff that I like to listen. It's very valuable.
I enjoyed.
hope the.
Sorry.
I was going to say that I hope the audience also found very useful advice and tips and stuff. And I'm inviting everybody who is listening and watching this video to post a comment if, for example, we didn't answer a question that you might have. Just post it here. And maybe you can also do another episode with you, Kim, some other time to discuss those open topics, questions people might have.
Happy to. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Bogi, and it was great talking to you today, Nikola. As you can tell, you've sparked a lot of recollection, reflection about my own experiences. And I mentioned I started my journey in 2010 and what is Agile. It's 13, 14 years now, and I'm still trying to figure it out. So frustrated where you are, don't give up. Focus on the people, focus on your own conduct and mindset, and that's the most important thing you can do.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kim, for being our guest.
Thank you, Kim. It's really a pleasure. Enjoy. Go subscribe. Watch us in YouTube and in all the Spotify, Apple Podcast, etc. Subscribe. It's really important to like and comment. And we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
I'm a devoted follower, so subscribe. Follow on social media. These guys are smart.